The wagon wheels groaned like tired old men as they rolled over the dry Texas earth, kicking up a trail of dust that clung to Clara Whitmore's lashes and settled into the seams of her worn blue dress. She did not wipe it away. She had learned, somewhere between burying her father and signing the last of the papers that sold off their failing farm in Missouri, that some discomforts were better endured than fought. The ranch rose from the prairie like a stubborn promise, a long, low house built of sun, bleached timber, a wide porch, a barn leaning slightly as though it had weathered more storms than it cared to remember. Beyond it, endless fields rolled out under a sky so wide it made a person feel either wonderfully free or terribly small. Clara was not sure yet which she felt. "They told me you'd be arriving before noon," the ranch foreman said as he helped her down from the wagon. His voice was rough with dust and authority. "You'll be working the east fields. Cotton's stubborn this year." She smoothed her skirt and met his gaze. "I was told I'd be helping in the house." The foreman barked a short laugh. "House is for family." Her jaw tightened. She had heard that tone before, the tone that measured a woman's worth in calluses and silence. A few men lingered nearby, leaning against fence posts or sitting astride restless horses. They looked at her the way one looks at a new tool, judging its usefulness. None of them stepped forward. None of them smiled, none except one. He stood a little apart from the others, hat tipped low, sunlight catching on the silver buckle at his belt. He was tall, broad-shouldered, the sort of man who seemed carved from the land itself. But there was something in his stillness that set him apart. Not hardness, but thoughtfulness. Clara noticed him noticing her. "You'll report at dawn." The foreman continued, "Fields don't wait." Clara opened her mouth to protest, to argue the agreement she had been promised in the letter written in careful script. But before she could speak, a deep voice cut through the air. "She'll report wherever she pleases." The foreman turned sharply. "And since when do you decide that, Luke?" So that was his name. Luke Carter stepped forward, boots crunching in the dirt. He removed his hat slowly, not as a challenge, but as a sign of civility. "Since my father left me in charge while he's away buying cattle, and since the agreement sent to Miss Whitmore stated she would assist where she was most suited." The foreman's lips thinned. "Fields need hands." Luke's gaze shifted to Clara, steady and assessing, but not unkind. "And what do you need, Miss Whitmore?" It startled her, the question. No one had asked her what she needed in months. "I need honest work," she said carefully, "and I need to keep my word." "And what word is that?" "That I won't let anyone decide my future for me." A faint smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. The foreman scoffed, "You'll spoil her with talk like that." Luke turned back to him, eyes cool. "She isn't a horse to be broken. She's an employee, and she'll do whatever she chooses." The words settled over Clara like a cloak she hadn't realized she'd been missing. The foreman muttered something under his breath but stepped aside. Luke replaced his hat. "You've had a long journey. Come inside. You can decide tomorrow where you'd like to begin." Inside, the ranch house smelled of cedar wood and fresh bread. Sunlight filtered through lace curtains, pooling across polished floors. Clara felt the ache in her shoulders as the tension she had carried for weeks began to ease. "You don't have to defend me," she said once they were alone. "I know," Luke replied simply. "Then why did you?" He paused, leaning one hip against the kitchen table. "Because choice matters. My mother used to say that if you take away a person's choices, you take away their spirit. And where is your mother now?" Buried on a hill west of here. She hated the fields. Clara studied him, yet she married a rancher. She chose it. That word again. "Chose. I can work the fields," Clara said. "I'm not afraid of hard labor." "I don't doubt that. But I can read accounts, keep ledgers, cook, sew, organize supplies. Then perhaps we should see which of those skills the ranch needs most. You'd let me decide." He met her eyes. "I said you would do whatever you choose. I meant it." The next morning, Clara rose before dawn and walked out to the east fields. The sky was painted in soft violet hues, the air cool and crisp. Workers were already gathering, murmuring among themselves when they saw her approach. She picked up a sack and stepped into the rows without a word. The cotton scratched at her fingers. The sun climbed higher. Sweat dampened her color and stung her eyes, but she did not falter. Luke watched from horseback for a time before dismounting. "You don't have to prove anything," he said quietly. "I'm not proving," she replied, tugging at a stubborn ball. "I'm choosing." He crouched beside her, examining the soil. "Fields are honest. They'll give back what you put in, but they'll also take more if you let them." She glanced at him. "Is that a warning? Maybe. About the land, about this place." The days unfolded in a rhythm of labor and quiet observation. Clara split her time between the fields and the house, slowly earning the respect of the workers through endurance rather than argument. She reorganized the pantry, corrected errors in the ranch's account books, and discovered that supplies had been miscounted for months. "You've a sharp eye," Luke remarked one evening as they sat on the porch, watching the sun sink behind the hills. "My father taught me numbers before he taught me baking," she said a woman who can count can't be cheated. Was he right? Mostly. A breeze lifted a strand of hair from her cheek. Luke reached out instinctively, then stopped himself. "Why come here?" He asked instead, "Because staying meant marrying a man who thought my mind was inconvenient. And here I was promised work, not ownership." Luke leaned back in his chair. "You'll never be owned here." It was not a grand declaration. It was a simple truth spoken plainly, and somehow that meant more. Not everyone shared Luke's sentiment. The foreman, Mr. Briggs, watched Clara with narrowed eyes. He found fault in small things, the way she stacked tools, the pace of her stitching, the fact that Luke consulted her on matters of supply. One afternoon, a storm rolled in fast and furious. Thunder cracked across the sky, sending cattle into a frenzy. Workers scrambled to secure fences and herd animals toward shelter. Clara ran toward the barn, skirts gathered in her fists. "You'll only be in the way." Briggs shouted after her. She ignored him. Inside the barn, a young calf had become trapped between a fallen beam and a stall. Panic shone in its wide eyes. Clara dropped to her knees in the mud, pushing at the beam with all her strength. It barely budged. A shadow fell over her. "Move aside." Briggs ordered. "No. You'll get crushed. Then help me lift." He hesitated, rain lashing against the barn roof. Before he could respond, Luke burst in, soaked through. Together, he and Clara strained against the beam. It shifted, then lifted enough for the calf to scramble free. Briggs stared at her as though seeing her for the first time. Later, when the storm had passed and the ranch settled into damp stillness, Luke found Clara sitting on an overturned bucket, exhaustion lining her face. "You could have been hurt," he said. "So could the calf. That's not the same. It is to me." He crouched in front of her. "You don't have to carry everything." She met his gaze steadily. "I don't want to be protected from life. I want to live it." A slow understanding dawned in his eyes. The weeks turned into months. Clara's laughter began to echo through the house. The workers no longer muttered when she passed. Even Briggs, though still gruff, ceased his complaints. One evening, as fireflies flickered in the warm dusk, Luke stood beside her at the fence line. "My father returns next week," he said, "and he's particular about women, about control." Clara folded her arms. "I won't shrink for him. I know. And you." He hesitated. I've spent years trying to be the son he expects. And what do you expect of yourself? The question lingered between them like a challenge. I expect, he said slowly, to build something better. When his father arrived, the tension was immediate. Thomas Carter was a man carved from stone and habit. His gaze swept over Clara as though assessing damage. I hear you've taken to the fields, he said at supper. When I choose to, Clara replied calmly, and the house. I manage that as well. Thomas looked to Luke. You've grown soft. I've grown fair, Luke answered. The older man's jaw tightened. This ranch thrives on order. Order isn't the same as control, Clara said quietly. Silence fell heavy over the table. Days passed in strained politeness. Thomas questioned every change Clara had made, every adjustment to accounts, every suggestion she offered. Then came the discovery. Clara had been reviewing old ledgers when she noticed discrepancies dating back years. Small but consistent losses in supply shipments. She traced them carefully, cross-checking dates and signatures. The evidence pointed to Briggs. She did not confront him immediately. Instead, she brought the books to Luke. I may be wrong, she said, but if I'm not, your father needs to see this. Luke's brow furrowed as he examined the figures. This could ruin him. It could ruin the ranch if left alone. Thomas listened in stony silence as they presented the evidence. Briggs was summoned, his face pale beneath sun, brown skin. At first he denied it. Then, faced with undeniable proof, his shoulders sagged. I took only what I thought I was owed, he muttered. Thomas's fury was quiet and terrifying. You were trusted. Briggs looked at Clara, resentment flickering. She dug it up. She corrected it. Luke said sharply. In the aftermath, Briggs was dismissed. The ranch reeled from the betrayal, but the books were balanced, the losses stemmed. That night, Thomas approached Clara alone on the porch. You could have kept silent, he said. I could have. Why didn't you? Because this ranch deserves honesty, and so do you. He studied her long and hard. You're not what I expected. No, she agreed softly, I'm not. Weeks later, Thomas called a gathering of the workers. His voice carried across the yard. Miss Whitmore has done this ranch a service, he announced. From this day forward, she oversees all accounts and domestic management. Murmurs rippled through the crowd, and her authority, he added, glancing at Luke, is to be respected. It was not an apology, but it was acknowledgment. As the crowd dispersed, Luke found Clara near the barn. You didn't just save the ranch, he said. You changed it. She smiled faintly. I only chose to care. He stepped closer, close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his eyes. And if you chose to stay, her heart beat a little faster. Would that be allowed? He reached for her hand, calloused fingers warm against hers. You'll do whatever you choose. The prairie stretched endless and bright around them, no longer a place of confinement, but of possibility. Clara looked at the house, at the fields, at the man before her. For the first time in a long while, her future felt like something she held, not something handed down. I choose, she said softly, to build something here. Luke's smile was slow and certain. Then we'll build it together. And beneath the wide Texas sky, where once she had been told she would work the fields and nothing more, Clara Whitmore stood not as labor, not as obligation, but as partner. Not owned, not confined, chosen, and choosing still.